Alrighty, welcome back. Outlier, Lisa Beeson, chapter 28, and we are so close. We only have 2 more chapters left. Alrighty. And pardon me, I've got that kitty cat here. And Val is the worst, Cam said after he dropped Ari's pillow off in her room and started leading her towards the elevator. Hey, you're gonna knock over all my stuff. Eesh. She just doesn't have a properly functioning doesn't have a properly functioning social filter. That's all, Ari said, getting into the glass elevator. What did she mean when she said, "Don't make me brown note you"? Cam grinned and pressed the button for the second level. I'd actually be more impressed than upset if she could pull it off. Her ability is similar to Claudia's. She can create and manipulate subsonic frequencies, so she basically threatened to use her ability to make me take a deuce in my pants, he said, laughing. Gross, Ari said in disgust. Are she and Claudia related? They don't really look alike. That's the thing about this place. A lot of them seem to be related in some way. Val and Claudia are half-sisters. Same dad, different moms. Apparently, dear old dad got busy with the Mexican maid while Claudia's mom was pregnant with her, and Val was the result. They're only about 6 months apart in age. Yikes, Ari said as they got out of the elevator. Yeah, talk about family drama, he said, leading her around another walkway. Needless to say, they don't get along very well. From the time they had gotten off the elevator, Ari was aware of a small, child-sized energy following stealthily behind them. But when she covertly glanced back through the dark veil of her hair, she was shocked to see only the bright, radiant energy of the child, and not the child itself. She focused harder and began to see the shape of a little girl start to coalesce, like a staticky TV coming into focus. But before she was able to get a good look at her, the door Cam knocked on clicked open. As she crushed forward, Ari was hit with the static energy coming off of a room full of adult progenies, and she froze. They were all seated in chairs on either side of a desk in the center of the room, looking at her expectantly. There were 7 of them in all. A few of them looked vaguely familiar. She figured they were the ones that had come in and out of her room, and there was a guy that looked like an older, slightly more Japanese version of Cam, whom she assumed was his dad. The only one she recognized for sure was Dr. Solomon. Ari glanced accusingly at Cam and thought at him, I thought you said it was just going to be Reinhold. That's what I thought. He didn't tell me that there was going to be anyone else, Cam thought back, and she could tell he was upset about it. She broke the connection, and it took everything she had not to look down and wither on the spot. All of their attention on her was torture. She had never felt so much like an outlier than at that moment. Telling herself that she didn't care what people thought was one thing, but actually practicing it was another matter altogether. Then she thought about how these people had taken samples from her without her permission, to do who knows what with them. And now they had the nerve to sit there gawking at her like some kind of sideshow freak who was supposed to put on a show for them. Their excitement over what she was and what she could do for them was almost palpable. They wanted to use her just like the Suits, and the Shades wanted to use her. Just like Kale did use her. Well, screw that. Squaring her shoulders and standing up as tall as she could with one leg in crutches, she put on her poker face and stared back at them confidently. They are not going to make me feel inferior. I am not weak, and I will not be used. Cam was pissed. He knew Ari hated drawing people's attention on a good day, let alone now. After everything she's been through, her accusing look pierced him like an arrow, like he had purposely tried to mislead her. He had no idea they would congregate like this and ambush her. He looked at them eagerly staring at her, and he was disappointed in all of them, and in himself for putting her in this situation. He was just about to scoop her up and take her back to the sanctuary of her room, expecting her to fold in on herself and withdraw again, when she surprised him by standing up straighter and doing that thing with her face where she lost all her Ari-ness. Cam called it her regal face, and her scars only made her that much more intimidating. She looked like a warrior queen that you did not want to mess with. She stared confidently back at all of them, and he couldn't have been more proud of her. You go, Pipes. He almost laughed at the way they all started to squirm under her fierce gaze, that a 14-year-old girl was putting all these adults in their place. As she challenged them all with her stare, she saw in her periphery that the little girl had snuck in behind her and Cam to sit on the floor in the corner of the room. She had crossed her legs and was now looking around excitedly, like this was the best show she'd seen in a long time. She was a sprightly little girl, wearing a cartoon Tyrannosaurus Rex t-shirt, a pink tutu skirt, and colorful polka dot leggings. She was maybe 7 or 8 years old, with big blue eyes that took in everything. Her riotously wavy, pale blonde hair almost looked purposely teased out to hide the splotchy red birthmark that covered half her face. Ari found it odd that nobody seemed to pay the little girl any attention, not even a glance in her direction. The old man behind the desk with the long gray hair tucked behind his ears, manicured facial hair, and the brightest energy she'd seen a progeny possess, came around and stepped forward. Ari, it's good to see you up and about. Would you like to have a seat? He asked, motioning to the high-backed swivel chair. No, thank you. I'd prefer to stand, she said stonily, pushing the chair away with her left crutch, knowing that it had been unnecessary, but it felt good nonetheless. She tried to read his intentions, but he was blocked off just like Hale had been, and she figured that it must have something to do with the protective field he generated. Great, another one, she thought sarcastically. As you wish, he said, casually sitting on the corner of his desk. He was seemingly trying to put her at ease, maybe finally realizing that all of them facing her together had been a miscalculation on their part. We didn't mean to bombard you like this, but we were all eager to meet and talk with you. I can't tell you how exciting it is to actually be in the presence of a... Wait, Ari interrupted. Too many people know things about me that I wish they didn't. I would rather not discuss these things in front of her. She turned and looked down at the little girl in the corner, whose eyes grew large with disbelief and outrage as she stood up indignantly. You silly girl. You're a silly girl. You're gonna knock over my things. How can you see me? She demanded, and the whole room jerked in surprise, like she had suddenly just popped into existence. Skylar, we've talked about this, Reinhold scolded as he stood up and walked over to her. Skylar's bottom lip quivered as she quickly glanced over at a woman on the other side of the room, and the adults mumbled their disapproval amongst each other, and Ari couldn't help feeling sorry for her. I'm sorry. I was just curious, Skylar said pitifully, and then nervously glanced at Ari before lowering her voice and saying, She's different somehow. Soren and I can feel it. Well, that's a bit disconcerting. Reinhold went down on a knee in front of her so they could be at eye level, and looked at her sternly, but not unkindly. If Ari wants to tell you about herself, that is up to her. Trust is easily lost and extremely hard to earn back. Sneaking around and eavesdropping. You're about to knock over my drink, and you're in the way of the video. I love you, baby. Trust is easily lost and extremely hard to earn back. Sneaking around and eavesdropping will not be tolerated. Do you understand? That's rich, coming from someone who knows more about me than I care for, Ari thought bitterly, but she appreciated the way he handled Skylar, gently but with authority. Ari figured that with an ability like Skylar's, it was important that she had a strong sense of integrity, not only for everyone's peace of mind, but for her own well-being. There are certain things young children shouldn't see or hear. I understand, Skylar said contritely, hanging her head. Good. Now we can start earning back our trust by going straight back to the rec room, where I'm sure Soren and the other kids are waiting for you." "Yes, sir," she said unenthusiastically. "That's a good girl," he said with a kind smile and a pat on her shoulder. Skylar turned around and walked towards the door while looking at Ari curiously, still amazed that she had been able to see her and mad that she had narked on her. After Skylar had closed the door behind her, Reinhold stood up and went over to check his computer screen, probably watching the multiple feeds throughout the building to see that she was actually going back to the rec room. When he was satisfied that she was, he came back around and sat on the edge of his desk. "I apologize. She's usually better behaved than that. Though it's amazing that you could see her in that state," he mused. Dr. Solomon cleared his throat. "Perhaps you should introduce everyone, Gordon," he prompted. I need to figure out some different voices for these guys. Dr. Solomon cleared his throat. "Perhaps you should introduce everyone, Gordon," he prompted. "Of course. Forgive me. I'm Gordon Reinhold," he said, standing up and putting his hand on his chest, and then he motioned towards the doctor. "Emma, you're gonna knock over all my stuff. Stop, please. Settle down." "You know Dr. Asa Solomon, and this is Maya Ashiri," he said, indicating the 30-something Indian woman sitting next to the doctor. Maya nodded her head, and Reinhold moved on to a black man in his mid to late 50s. "Hugo Fontaine, and next to him is my son Wyatt." Wyatt had the same blue eyes as his father, and looked like the type of guy that spent a lot of time in the gym. Curious, Ari tried to read Wyatt's intentions, but he was just as blocked off as his father. He seemed disconcerted that she was looking at him so intensely, so she stopped and looked back at Reinhold, who had moved on. "Hi, baby." He was now gesturing towards the pale woman with long dark hair that Skylar had glanced at earlier. This was one of the people Ari had recognized when she entered the office, one of the people that had been in and out of her room. The woman was now trying to smile reassuringly at Ari. "This is Marin Laramie." Then he pointed to the man next to her, who had hooded eyes and a swarthy complexion and a 5 o'clock shadow. "That's George Bruni, Alvaro's father, and at the end is Miles Baldwin, Cam's father." Ari conceded that none of them seemed to have menacing or harmful intentions. She had to take a step back and try to look at this whole situation levelly and unbiasedly. Look at the big picture. They had healed her and had taken her and Cam in. Cass had originally wanted her to go here, and supposedly they were safe from the suits at Science Keep. And it wasn't like there was anywhere else for them to go, especially now that she was down to one leg, and they were supposedly making her a new one. They were curious, and she could understand that, but it didn't mean she wanted to be used or experimented on. In order to stay control of her situation, she knew that she couldn't be seen as a child. She had to be seen as intelligent and mature, confident in what she wanted and how she was going to be treated. As Ari was thinking all this over, her leg and arms began to shake from fatigue, and she was starting to regret not taking the chair when it was offered. She was determined not to show any weakness, so without looking at Cam, she latched on and asked, "Can you roll that chair over to me, Cam? I'm getting tired." He nodded, then quickly rolled the high-back swivel chair behind her, and she tried to sit down as gracefully as she could. Cam took her crutches and stood to the side like a sentinel, and she was grateful for his stalwart presence. Are you feeling tired, Ari?" Dr. Solomon asked anxiously. "I'm fine," she lied. Not buying it, he shared a meaningful look with George, who then got up and quickly left the room. Maya looked curiously between Ari and Cam. "Did you just talk to him telepathically?" Ari gave her a cool gaze, thinking that it was none of her business, but she nodded yes. Maya's eyes widened with excitement. "Really? Cam said you can put images in people's minds. Would you mind showing us?" "She's not here to entertain you all like a trained monkey. Cam said defensively. We know that, Cam, Miles said calmly, and Cam cut him a resentful glance. Ari vaguely remembered Cam saying that Miles had left to protect him and his mom from the suits, and she couldn't honestly fault the man for that. Wasn't that exactly what she had done to the Rileys and the Lennoxes? She could sense that he was a good man and wanted to redeem himself in his son's eyes, and Cam wasn't exactly making it easy for him. They needed this time together to heal the rift between them. Then Ari felt the icy claw of panic run up her spine as she thought of Cam not needing her anymore now that he had his real family. She tried to let it go, seeing it for the selfish fear that it was. Miles and Cam were actual blood relatives, and they needed each other. She couldn't, in good conscience, let herself get in the way of that. She'd do what was best for him, even though the thought of Cam pulling away from her was like a dagger in her heart. Hi, baby. Hi, sweetheart. You want to come up? No? Come on up. Oh, you're a silly girl. Oh, you're a silly baby girl. Oh, you're coochie, coochie, coochie girl. Oh, you're coochie, coochie baby. I love you. Oh, my sweetheart. Come on. She'd do what was best for him. Even though the thought of Cam pulling away from her was like a dagger in her heart. Turning back to Reinhold, she decided to put all that behind her and get down to business. I appreciate everything you have all done for me during my convalescence. I wouldn't be alive right now if it wasn't for your help. She tipped her head in thanks at Dr. Solomon, and he nodded back in acknowledgement. But like you said, she continued on, turning back to Reinhold, trust is easily lost, and I do not approve of the unnecessary and ill-gotten acquisition of my blood and tissue cells without my knowledge and consent. Reinhold blinked at her in surprise. No, I wouldn't call it ill-gotten. Mr. Kale is the guardian of... You silly girl. Now, I wouldn't call it ill-gotten. Mr. Kale is the guardian of Ariadne Kale, and she does not exist, Ari interrupted. He is not my legal guardian, and does not have the right to speak for me. That being said, I am willing to cooperate and collaborate with you, but I will not be manipulated or used, or seen as anything other than a person who deserves consideration and respect. We had no intention of treating you otherwise, Reinhold assured her. We promise that you will have our utmost respect and consideration, and from now on we will not proceed with anything concerning you without your permission. Hugo leaned forward in his chair. We apologize if you perceive our actions as underhanded or deceitful, Ari, and we deeply regret your loss of trust in us. We took the opportunity to analyze your samples only as a way to try and understand ourselves and our ancestors better. Mr. Kale left before we could ask questions, but we had hoped that you would be inclined to help us understand more about where you came from. And we've barely scratched the surface of all the amazing properties of your blood and cells, Ari, let alone your genetic makeup, Maya interjected. Aren't you curious about who you are and what you're capable of? Of course I am, but I also don't want to end up as a lab rat. And if word got out that I was an impossible hybrid of two alien races, then that's exactly what I would become. She brought her attention back to Hugo. As to where I came from, I have no clue. Unfortunately, I have no memories before I woke up in a coma 9 years ago. Everything I know comes from Kale, and it's not much. Just then there was a knock at the door. Reinhold checked his screen, then pushed a button, and in walked George with an insulated cup, with a large milkshake straws sticking out of it. He walked over to Ari and held it out to her. Drink up. It'll make you feel better. Ari looked suspiciously at the murky green sludge, and she remembered that there was always a cup of this stuff on the trays of food they had brought to her. It was just as unappealing now as it was when she didn't have an appetite. What is it? It's a combination of fruits, vegetables, and herbs that we grow in our greenhouse, blended with ice, honey, and some Greek yogurt. It's not a hot fudge sundae, but it's what your body needs to gain its strength back, George said, obviously used to kids not wanting to drink the concoctions. Ari took the cup and started drinking, not wanting to seem like a petulant and ungrateful child. It wasn't the best thing she ever had, but it wasn't the worst either. Satisfied, George sat back down in his seat, and Marin took his hand, like they were a couple, and rested it on her lap. That made Ari wonder. Marin had a different last name, and looked nothing like Alvaro. What happened to his real mother? But it was none of her business, so she brought her attention back to Reinhold, and continued to drink her concoction. I'm sure you're curious as to how things work in Scion's Keep, he said. Well, Hugo and Marin run the Pinnacle Academy and are in charge of the education of the miners and the residents. After studies are completed, there is an alternating duties schedule where the children help out in keeping this place running smoothly. The older adolescents take shifts at the Knock and are encouraged to take on an apprenticeship with any of the adults whose field of work they find interesting. For example, Claudia is interested in using her ability in the field of medicine, so she is now apprenticing under Aza. Meals are at set times, but there are always snack options available if you require such. The gym facilities are always open, but the library and rec room open at 7 a.m. and close at 10 p.m. Marin has a room on the 4th level. She is there as a chaperone and as a liaison, so if you have any questions or need any assistance, please feel free to ask her. Anything at all, Ari, I'm always available, Marin assured her. Ari looked over into her mint green eyes, and she sensed that Marin was a kind person who enjoyed acting as the mother figure for the kids. And of course, Cam can show you around and answer any of your questions when you feel up to it, said Reinhold. Actually, Miles interjected, we were wondering if you wouldn't mind coming down to the lab so we can measure you for your prosthetic. And we can go over what we've learned from your samples, Maya added. Ari was almost finished with the green sludge drink, and she was surprised at how much stronger and invigorated she felt. Maybe there really is something to these super drinks. Sure, I'm actually feeling much better, she turned to George. Thank you. George smirked and nodded as if to say, I told you so, and then he stood up and took the empty cup from her. Excellent, Reinhold said as he got up from the desk. Cam gave her back the crutches, and she was able to stand up without a problem. Then she followed Miles, Cam, Aza, and Maya towards the lab. I guess that chapter took a fair bit of time, so we'll go ahead and end this video and start the next. I imagine with all the chapters I've done in between my last work day, which is where I upload them because I don't have electricity, I imagine I'm probably almost out of phone space, I would think. But I think we might just make it to the end of the book at least. All right, thank you for joining us for chapter 28. Peace.